around here again, and I know you're probably wondering what happened to the last video. I took it down because I don't know if that kind of video didn't interest people. There wasn't a lot of response back. And again, it was just having fun, in my own ideal world, how I would do the Expendables franchise, because I feel there was a lot of wasted opportunities. So I just sort of made up my own, who I would cast, etc. So again, just having fun. You know, some videos work, some videos don't, and maybe someday I'll come back to that. But I had this other topic in mind for a video, talking about films that should have had a sequel, or a couple of sequels, a trilogy. So I picked out a few films. Easily, I could have brought in a bunch of films that, you know, I feel should have had a sequel, but I picked out a certain number. So today I'm going to do that. Um, so again, I got a few right here. But kicking off with the first film that I think should have had a sequel is Arachnophobia. Classic movie. You got Jeff Daniels, John Goodman. And how I would do a sequel is I would pick up where the movie ends. They move back to the city, and Jeff Daniels and his family, and you could have had spiders in the city. Maybe this time there's an even bigger nest. I would have John Goodman back as the exterminator. And one thing about this film, Arachnophobia, John Goodman's great, but he's not in the film too much if you think about it. He's in maybe a couple of scenes here in the second act. You see him more in the third act, but he's not in the film too much. Maybe with Arachnophobia 2, I would have Jeff Daniels and John Goodman throughout the film, and they have to take out spiders in the city. And it would make for, it would make for a great sequel, because again, you would have Jeff Daniels and John Goodman side by side, and you can, I don't know how you would. I mean, I was thinking about, what kind of kills I would have, but you just have fun with it. And again, maybe they can. This time it's an even bigger nest, and you can do a lot there with practical effects. Um, so yeah, I would just have a sequel and just pick it right up, where this film ends. Have John Goodman's character come to the city because there's more spiders, spiders invading the city, and give John Goodman a lot more to do in a sequel. And like today, I would not want to see this film because I think they would mess it up. I don't even know with Jeff Daniels what he thinks about the film, like if he likes the film or whatever. Um, I would like to think so, that Jeff Daniels likes Arachnophobia. He's great in it, and I like John Goodman. So yeah, and you can bring back Frank Marshall to direct. I thought he did a good job with this film. He also directed Congo, which I enjoy. That's a fun movie. But yeah, Arachnophobia 2, I think should have happened. It would have been a fun sequel to see. So again, take place in the city, but do that one. Put that right there. This next one, to me, is a no-brainer. I think there should have been a sequel. I know there's talks of a reboot. We don't need a reboot. And that is Big Trouble in Little China. Yeah, trying to stay away from that. But Big Trouble in Little China, I think, should have had a sequel. I think more so back in the day, you could have had it a couple of years after this film. I mean, when the film came out, it was sort of a weird time because Aliens sort of overshadowed everything else. And again, we don't need a reboot with Dwayne Johnson. I know lately there hasn't been too much said about that, so maybe they put it off. But I think there should be a sequel to this film. As for, what kind of direction or story, I don't know. I mean, I didn't really put a lot of thought into that, but But you can do anything with Jack Burton because he's such a great character, and you can have his buddy back. I think uh, I don't know the actor's name. It's leaving me, but you can have his buddy in the film from the first movie. Again, I think the actor's name is Dennis something. I forgot his last name, but I enjoyed him in this film. And again, bring him back and just more adventures with the Pork Chop Express. Sure, you can bring back Kim Control. I wouldn't mind that. Have John Carpenter direct. Um, so yeah, I mean this one should have had a sequel. If John Carpenter, if he could do one more film, one last film to end it on, it would either be a Thing sequel, but I would probably lean towards more doing a sequel to Big Trouble in Little China because I know Kurt Russell, he likes the character, and I just want to see more adventures with Jack Burton. And you can go anywhere with this character because it's a classic character. And again, John Carpenter, let him do his thing, let him direct, and you know, so yeah. And as far as features on this Blu-ray, you do have a commentary by Carpenter and Kurt Russell, featurette from back in the day. So if people are curious about that, but definitely Big Trouble in Little China 2, I think should have happened more so back in the day because now what would happen with this is they would stall and stall and stall and just wait for a reboot, which again, I know they're trying to reboot, but we don't need a reboot. I'd much rather have a sequel. So Big Trouble in Little China 2, for sure, should have happened. This next one, also a no-brainer. Cobra with Stallone. Classic action film. I know there were some ideas out there for a sequel, and that Andrew Robinson's character was sort of going to be the head bad guy of the New World. That you would find out his character was, the one behind it all, and he was going to be the villain for the second film. But I think that Cobra should have been a trilogy because it was pretty much Stallone's Dirty Harry. And do I think it could have worked now? I'd much rather have a Cobra 2 than a Rambo 5, if you were to ask me. I think that Stallone should have done a Cobra 2 instead of Rambo 5 and Escape Plan 2 and 3. Because imagine Cobra in today's society, with social media, and you can have his character still be that old school, hero, that old school type of character. And, I like to, I think, I would like to see Stallone do a sequel, but I don't know, I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately. But certainly back in the day, it would have worked. I would like to have seen a trilogy back in the day of Cobra. Again, it's Stallone's Dirty Harry franchise. And as for the villains, I mean, I mentioned Andrew Robinson because I've heard that before, that idea that he was behind it all, that he sort of orchestrated, I think the New World, I think that's what they were called, but so maybe you can have him as the villain for the second film, sure. So yeah, definitely, I think there should have been a Cobra 2 back in the day. Maybe have Stallone direct the sequel. And fuck it, have him direct the third film. But, and as far as features on this, you do have a commentary by director George P. Cosmatos and a making-of featurette. So, yeah, a Cobra 2, I would love, if any sequel that I would like to see Stallone tackle would be a Cobra 2, but I don't think he's going to do it. He's too caught up in Rambo 5. But certainly back in the day, Again, I think there should have been at least a couple of sequels to Cobra. So, great film. It should have happened. This next one is an Arnold film that I feel is underrated. And I think there should have been at least one sequel. And that's Eraser. I really enjoy this film. And again, it's a fun action film. I feel it's underrated. As far as the sequel, maybe you could have, Arnold trying to, maybe his character, his identity is being erased. And he has to fight back and protect his identity instead of, where in the first film he was protecting Vanessa Williams. Maybe in the sequel you can have him fight, the bad guys or protect his identity. Something like that. And maybe you could have had it come out around, 2000. Really, I like the Sixth Day, but if it were up to me, I would have, like that year, have a Eraser sequel, like a sequel to Eraser, because I like this character, John Kruger. I thought James Caan was a good villain in this one. I don't know who he would have as a villain in the sequel, but I didn't really think about it. But I would definitely have Chuck Russell come back to direct. He did a great job on this. He also directed The Blob and The Mask. And yeah, I think Eraser should have had at least one sequel because it's a fun action film, and it would have been cool to see Arnold revisit this character again around maybe 2000, 2001, and certainly before Arnold went into politics. There should have been a second film. Again, maybe instead of The Sixth Day, which I like The Sixth Day, they should have been an Eraser too. So, yeah, underrated film. So there's that one. I would have been down for that. This next one, I feel should have had a trilogy because there's a lot you can do with this franchise, and that's Timecop with Van Damme. What's surprising is this was Van Damme's biggest hit. And I know there's a sequel out there, a direct-to-video sequel with Jason Scott Lee. I haven't seen that, and to be honest, I'm not in a hurry. I think that Van Damme should have made sequels. Or really, the studios, should have made a couple of sequels to this film because, again, it's about time travel, and you can go anywhere. You can go anywhere with this character. You can go in the future, into the future. You can go into the past. And I know Van Damme in the late 90s had his problems with drugs and stuff, but, again, being that Timecop was Van Damme's biggest hit, and they didn't think about doing sequels, I don't get that. I think there should have been a trilogy because you can take this character anywhere. Maybe you can have this character go back to, I don't know, the Civil War, something like that. You can take him into the future. I don't know what villains you would have, but bring back Peter Hyams to direct it. Direct the second film. I don't know who you would have direct the third film, but this is one that it's a head scratcher to me because, again, Timecop was Van Damme's biggest hit, and I don't know why there was never a sequel. And again, I think you could have had a couple of sequels from Timecop with Van Damme coming back. Not a direct-to-video sequel with Jason Scott Lee, but with Van Damme in the main role. So that should have happened. Maybe Van Damme could still do it. I wouldn't mind if he did. I mean, today I think if he were to announce tomorrow, hey, I'm doing a Timecop, 2, a proper sequel. That's what I mean, a proper sequel with Van Damme. I'll be down for it. So yeah, certainly. With this Timecop, I think there should have been at least a couple. So yeah, I want to mention that one. This next one, I think there should have been a proper sequel to this one, and that's The Punisher from 2004. I like this film. I don't get some of the hate. I know he did a short film called Dirty Laundry, um, which you can find on YouTube. And I know they sort of did a second film, well, The Punisher Warzone, which I haven't seen yet. I picked that up recently. But, and I was going back and forth if I wanted a sequel to Dolph's The Punisher or this Punisher film. But I chose this Punisher film because I love Thomas Jane. I love Dolph Lundgren's Punisher. That's probably that's my favorite, but I think there should have been a proper sequel to this film. Bring back Thomas Jane as the Punisher. I thought he was great. Um, and I know that Thomas Jane, he loves the character, and he loved being the Punisher. And I'd much rather I'd much rather have a sequel today. Like I haven't seen that Netflix series, so I can't really say much about John Bernthal's Punisher. Um, I just only seen clips and stuff, but you know, when you're talking about this film right here, again, Thomas Jane's great. John Travolta, I thought was a great bad guy. I know that I think when Thomas Jane was approached with Warzone, I think he read the script and he didn't like it, so I can't blame him for not doing it. But yeah, I think there should have been a proper sequel with Thomas Jane because this film kicks ass. It's a great comic book film, and I feel it's underrated. So yeah, there should have been a sequel to The Punisher with Thomas Jane, and trying to get away from that. There you go. But definitely should have been a sequel. Not Punisher Warzone with Ray Stevenson. Almost said Frank Stevenson. He looks like a Frank. But someday, sometime soon, I'll check out Warzone. But there should have been a sequel. Thomas Jane is great as the Punisher. This next one, Tango and Cash, with Stallone and Kurt Russell. I think there should have been at least one sequel with these two because these two were great. They had great rapport. It's a classic buddy cop film. Maybe you could have Stallone direct it. Maybe Rennie Harlan direct it. I was trying to think of other action directors. Maybe Peter Hyam, not Peter. Who else? Who else? Who other directors? I thought about Peter Hyams, but I was trying to. There's another director that I was thinking about that maybe could have directed a Tango and Cash too. Um, maybe Dwight H. Little. I thought he did. The guy that directed Rapid Fire and Marked for Death. Um, I don't know. I mean, any name you could think of, um, like action directors in the early '90s. But yeah, I think there should have been a Tango and Cash too, because I love Stallone, I love Kurt Russell. Jack Palance was a great villain, and I just like to have seen another adventure with these two. And again, I don't know what kind of plot you would have, but I would have been down for it. And I think it should have came out maybe around '91 because during that time Stallone wasn't doing a whole lot. I like Oscar. That's a fun movie that came out around that time, but it seems like between 90 and 92 until 93 came along, then he did two great films that year, Demolition Man and Cliffhanger. He didn't really there wasn't too much going on with Stallone. I mean, I know he did a couple of comedies, but Um, I think, a sequel to this should have been made around that time. And yeah, this is a great buddy cop film that it screams it screams that there should have been another film with these two. And it's funny because when you think about it, both of these actors were they were in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, but they never had one scene together. I mean, he had Stallone and Michael Rooker have this scene, but it would have been cool to see Stallone and Kurt Russell share at least one scene, but that didn't happen. And could it work today? I think it's too late. Um, I think now would be too late, but I think back in the day, yeah, I think back in the day it should have happened. But yeah, Tango and Cash 2 should have happened. Next up, I think there should have been at least one film, one sequel to this, and that's The Blob. Great horror film, and you can sort of pick up, where the movie ends, where the Reverend, I think was it Del Close, he has the jar, and I mean, as far as story or plot, again, I didn't really put in a lot of thought into that, but you can go anywhere with that. Bring back, Kevin Dillon and Shawnee Smith and Chuck Russell, who also directed Eraser. I just talked about that one, but I'd like to have seen a sequel to this film because it's a great horror film with a great cast, great special effects, practical effects, and I would have been down for it. This is another one that people may not have expected or may not expect to be brought up in regards to that it should have had a sequel, but I feel that The Blob, should have had at least one sequel, so I wanted to mention that one. The Blob's a classic. One of the great remakes, in my opinion. Like, you want to talk about remakes, this is a great one from back in the day. But The Blob. This next one, also a no-brainer. I know there's talks of, well, ever since this film came out, there's been talks of doing a sequel, but nothing's happened yet. Maybe someday it will, because it should. Talking about Dredd from 2012. I don't know why I didn't see this in the theater. Um, I watched it probably a month ago, and it's a great film. Carl Urban is great. Great visuals. And yes, I think there should be a sequel. I don't know what they're waiting on. I mean, when the film came out, I think, it didn't do much. So I don't know if it's the studios, they look at that and be like, oh, Dredd didn't do anything when it came out. Unfortunately, it should have been bigger. I mean, it's a great film, but fuck the studios, really, for stalling on this one. I don't know why are they stalling on a Dredd 2? It should be made. This is one I don't understand. There should be another one. Carl Urban's great as Judge Dredd, and it's a great reboot. This is how you do a reboot, like Judge Dredd with Stallone. I can watch as a time waster. But if you were to ask, me to pick one, I would pick this film because this one worked, and it's a great movie. It's hyper violent. Carl Urban kicks ass. I don't know why. I honestly don't know why they're stalling. I know there was talks of a series, like the Omega City series, but nothing's been said or updated on that. But yeah, Dredd 2, I don't know what they're waiting on. It needs to happen. Dredd 2, Carl Urban comes back. I know he wants to come back as Dredd. So make it happen, studios. Dredd 2. This next one, I think there should have been a sequel to. Definitely. Demolition Man with Stallone. And maybe this time you can have, I mean, obviously Snipes wouldn't come back, but, have maybe a villain this time that's in the future. I was trying to think who you would have as the villain. I think at one point, like, when they were making this film, I think they wanted Jackie Chan to be the villain, and he turned it down. So, but it would have been interesting. I mean, thinking about that, I was trying to think of who would play a villain for a sequel, and I don't know. I mean, now it's a great film, and I don't know why the director. I think he directed this film, and that's kind of it. Like, he disappeared. I don't know what happened. Like, I would like to know what happened to that director, Marco Brambilla. Like, he directed Demolition Man, and that was it. I think he should have made more films, directed more action films. Maybe he could have worked with Stallone again. But it's unfortunate. Like, I don't know what happened, but talking about a sequel, have John Spartan come back, have Sandra Bullock's character come back, and again, this time you can have him take on a villain in the future. Maybe it's like I would have done back in the day. I mean, I don't know about a sequel today, but certainly back in the day, maybe the mid-90s, late 90s. I was trying to think of a villain, like who would play a villain. Maybe some of y'all out there can think of one, but yeah. Yeah, definitely should have been a sequel to Demolition Man. I think there's more you can do with John Spartan. Yeah. And this also needs better features because there's not... You have a commentary track by the director and producer, but that's kind of it. So, yeah. Classic movie. Love Demolition Man. And to sort of backtrack a little bit on the Blob, again, I would have had it made back in the day because nowadays it would just be bad. It would be, bad CGI and a Sci-Fi Channel sequel. So back in the day, early 90s. This next one is a comedy, which I feel is underrated, and no one really talks about this film much. And I think it would have been fun to see a sequel, especially with these guys. But Airheads, fun movie. Brendan Fraser, Steve Buscemi, Adam Sandler. I don't know what kind of plot you would have, but I would like to see these three do another film because this is such a fun film, and I may watch this. Rewatch it again today, and it's such an underrated comedy. And there's a lot of people who appear in this film. I mean, you got Chris Farley, Michael McKean, Judd Nelson, Michael Richards. I remember Ernie Hudson was in the film, and Chris Farley, and I think Harold Ramis is in this too. Harold Ramis appears in the film. So you got a lot of appearances. And maybe, I don't know, if you did a sequel to Airheads, it would probably be on Netflix or something like that, but I think a sequel would be fun. With these three guys. Because I thought they had a good chemistry. So I would be down for it. I know Adam Sandler, nowadays he's doing films for Netflix and such. He definitely, because when you rewatch this film, this was before Billy Madison, and Adam Sandler's character is sort of in the back. It's more of a Brendan Fraser film. But I would still like to have Sandler come back, and Steve Buscemi, and Brendan Fraser, and just have a fun sequel. So again, I don't know how you would do it, but you know, if it were made back in the day, it would have been fun. So yeah, Airheads is a fun movie. And the last one, the last film I'm gonna mention here, definitely an action classic, Commando with Arnold. I know there were some ideas out there for a sequel, Commando 2, and I want to say, I could be wrong, but I think some of those ideas were turned into Die Hard. If I'm wrong, please correct me. But I think that was sort of the idea. Uh, but certainly, I think back in the day, Commando 2 should have happened. Bring back Arnold and just have him kick ass. And again, I know there was talks of a Commando 2, and Jack Craven, if you're watching, um, maybe he'll comment down below and about some of those ideas, because I read about some of those ideas one time that they had for a sequel. Uh, but Commando, getting into the film, it's an action classic. Mark L. Lester did a great job directing, and maybe you could have had a sequel around 87, 88, maybe 88. That way, you know, it would have been an even more great year for action, because you had Die Hard that year, Young Guns, um, Rambo 3, Bloodsport, Above the Law, They Live. You could have had Commando 2. You could have squeezed it in, into that year. And again, I don't know where you could take the sequel, but I would have been down for anything, because, the first film is a kick-ass movie. So many great lines. Bring back Mark L. Lester to direct, and just have a great follow-up. So, yeah, Commando should have had a sequel back in the day. But that's kind of it. And again, just wanted to mention a few films that I think should have had at least one sequel or a couple of sequels. Again, with Timecop, I think it should have had at least one or two sequels. With Cobra, same thing. Um, but what are some films that you feel that should have had a sequel or two? Um, you know, Let me know down below. And this was fun, so I want to thank y'all for watching. And yeah, fun discussion here. So thank y'all for watching, and we'll see you later.